Hello everyone. Welcome you all to the panel discussion on overcome COVID-19 challenges in banking and finance sector with WSO2 identity and access management solutions. I'm Savani Disanayaka. We are doing this panel discussion with the partnership of DFCC Bank Sri Lanka. So Pradeepan is joining with us from DFCC Bank. He is the manager digital banking at DFCC. Pradeepan is going to discuss about his experience in DFCC Bank, how they overcame COVID-19 challenges, and how they use WSO2 identity and access management solutions for that. Also, three of my colleagues from Chakra Consultancy is also joining with us to discuss their experience in identity and access management domain. So Timita, Tara, and Nuan. So they are specifically going to talk about their experience in identity and access management in banking and finance sector. So we will directly move into the topic. So our discussion topic is how to overcome COVID-19 challenges in banking and finance sector with WSO2 identity and access management solutions. So in this case, most of the industries has to face a lot of challenges due to this COVID-19 pandemic. One of the major challenge banking and finance sector has to face was they has to introduce a digital banking solution in a very short period of time, and with that there are a lot of other challenges like managing the digital identity, providing the required security, and also catering the business requirements. So those are some of the challenges that has to banking and finance sector has to face with this COVID-19 pandemic. So we are going to discuss about all these things within this panel discussion. First, I would like to discuss with Pradeepan about his experience in DFCC Bank. So in DFCC Bank also has to face this challenge because they had to introduce these digital banking solutions within a very short period of time, and in that they had to manage the digital identity. And I would like to know from Pradeepan how they handle this and how they use identity and access management, specifically WSO2 identity and access management in that case.
Okay, first and foremost, thank you for the introduction, Savani, and thank you, Chakri, for inviting me to speak here. And a warm good afternoon and a welcome to all the participants online. Let me try and share as much as possible in terms of the WSO2 IAM solution from a banking sphere angle, especially from a business side of things. I'm open to any questions. You can pop it on the chat, or you can always reach out to me via my LinkedIn page. I'm pretty active on it. Just a side note before I answer the question, DFCC Bank PLC is the second oldest bank in Sri Lanka. We have a rich heritage of 65 years. We have been the pioneers in development banking, and now we are a fully fledged commercial bank since 2015, post our merger with Vardhana Bank. Not only have we been the pioneers when it comes to development banking, we've also worked on the digital banking space quite a lot. We were the first bank and still the only bank in Sri Lanka to run a fully fledged virtual wallet in the market. And another example that I could quote is we have a really good payments and cash management solution called DFCC iConnect, which I'm very happy to state recently won the Euromoney Award amongst global banks from a Sri Lankan perspective. That's about DFCC. Now going back to Savani's question. So COVID has been hard on all of us, but more than COVID, the digital transformation space, especially in digital banking, has been really rapid, and it has kept us on our toes. We've had to think outside of our box and come out of our comfort zones. And that's where, from an identity angle, the bank took a strategic decision in 2020, that's this year. We decided to go ahead with an IAM solution. We looked out in the market and we felt the WSO2 solution was the best for us. And we went ahead with the implementation, and we almost reached from scratch to UAT within 3 months. So the WSO2 solution allows you that benefit to rapidly grow as well. In terms of the solution and what we have done for identities, the number one thing is from a customer angle, it's very easy for a customer. We have multiple solutions. We have a wallet, we have a pay app, we have a mobile banking solution, and a really good online banking solution coming up in the future. So customers can use their same credentials and log into all the platforms. WSO2 IAM has also helped us smoothing our onboarding process, where we're trying to make it less frictionless as much as possible, so customers can onboard without reaching out to the bank as much. So that's from the customer angle. From a bank perspective, it has been really helpful for us. We have decoupled the entire solution, made it separate rather than having it as many individual solutions. We've made it centralized, so it's very easy for us to scale and grow. And if we come up with newer solutions, it's much more easy for us to adapt. The second reason I would say it really helps out is basically when it comes to our operations, we have a single platform for a lot of front-end customer-facing things. So operational team is very happy as well. So that's my synapses in terms of using the WSO2 IAM solution during the COVID period and with respect to growing fast.
Thank you, Pradeepan. So you talk about the mobile banking and also the internet banking application. So when it comes to these kind of applications, security is a main aspect. So can you tell us how DFCC Bank achieved the security measurements and how what are the measures that you took to prevent the malicious attacks, and how you utilize IAM solutions in that aspect as well?
Okay, that's a very good question, Savani, because if you look at from a banking angle, banking is nothing but trust. We have to have customers trust on board, and having a very secure and safe digital solution is a must, and trust comes into play. But it's a tight rope walk for us because as much as security is it's necessary, we also have to make sure the customer experience is really good. So I'll probably give you some examples where we have done this in such a manner so both our requirements are met. The third thing that we have to keep in mind is the Central Bank of Sri Lanka's regulation with respect to mobile payments, which came out this year. So we've adapted to that as well in a much more swift manner to ensure there are no malicious attacks, etc. on those lines. The first example that I can give you is we have done something called an IMEI coupling. So what it basically means is you can log into an application from a single device only, mobile device only. But with the help of WSO2, we've also ensured the customer experience of it is right. So if a customer tries to log in from another device, we allow him as well, but post the validation, secondary validation. So that's something that we have done. The other thing that we have really looked at is from the authentication angle and the password policies, etc. So our bank has a very strong and stringent one in place, and we've been able to use the platform as it is and build it the way we want without any hassle. And the good thing is you can also go back and change the policy if you want at a whim if the regulators change it and go forward. Adaptive authentication is something that we've implemented as well. I'm pretty sure the upcoming speakers will talk on those lines. So in terms of authentication and password policy, that's something that we've done. The third one probably I would like to highlight is with regards to consent management. And consent management, everybody is aware of how GDPR is working and everything. So that's something that we have worked out with Chakra as well. So something that's going to come into Sri Lanka. So keeping that in mind, there are certain elements that we have implemented. The last item I would say in terms of malicious attacks and everything is session management. So we've implemented something really good with the platform as well. Since we have multiple solutions with a single credential going forward, customers should be able to seamlessly have that omni-channel experience. We've implemented really good session management as well to ensure there are no attacks, etc.
Thanks, Pradeepan. So valuable. You have given a valuable input about how you handle the security of your application. So actually, DFCC Bank is one of the first banks who incorporate WSO2 identity and access management solution into their applications. So as a market leader of this area, what you have to tell other banks, specifically Sri Lankan banks, what you have to tell them about your experience and about those things?
I think the main thing for me is we all perceive WSO2 IAM solution as like a basic thing that is to do with user logins and credentials for external users. I think we have to move away from that. I'll probably answer this question in terms of what we as a bank plan to do for the upcoming years with the WSO2 ISM solution. So I think that will give a better insight for other banks and others who are online as well. The number one thing is we are looking at implementing the IAM solution for our internal systems as well, not only the external systems. We have close to 65 internal systems used by bank users. So we want to make that as well a single user platform, single credential user platform. So that's one big thing that we want to do. The other thing that we want to do is work on the analytics side of things. So the WSO2 IAM solution also provides that where we get a rich source of data in terms of customer behavior, peak login hours, etc. On those lines. So we want to mine that data and ensure our future decisions are made based on those. So mine the data from the platform. The third thing that we would like to look at is single sign-on. As much as we want to try and see how we can get the customer to onboard by himself and go forward. Another thing that we have already done, but we really want to look forward to, is creating different views to the backend users based on the platform. So if you take the WSO2 IAM solution, right now we have multiple teams working on it, but we've already gone ahead and implemented a specific view just for our call center. So our call center staff, when they log into the backend platform and when the customer calls, everything is on a single click, maximum 3 clicks to sort out any issue. So the backend solutioning part of it from the platform for our bank users is something that we would look at. From a futuristic angle, what we would like to do with the solution, IAM solution, is to see how we can bring it into our open banking solutions for the future. So a lot of other businesses, up and coming startups, etc., can use the APIs and grow as well. The last item I would like to mention is try and see how much personalization we can bring into our customers' lives with the platform. Because going forward in the banking industry, we have 24 commercial banks in Sri Lanka. It's a very tight space. It's a lot of high good competition. So we want to try and bring the personalization element with the platform as well. So that's what we would want to do for the upcoming future, apart from the standard things that somebody would do with an IAM solution. So I hope other banks also can take a example out of that.
Yes, Pradeepan, exactly. So, actually, Pradeepan, when you are talking about, you have talked about the adaptive authentication, how you handle the security with adaptive authentication. So, Timita has some good experience working with the adaptive authentication, specifically to this banking and finance domain. Timita, can you share your experience with adaptive authentication and intelligent adaptive authentication in that domain with us?
Yes, Savani, thanks. So, as we were working with DFCC, so for the Pradeepan and everyone, they were focusing on security and also the usability, right? So I remember Pradeepan had some interesting questions on how to use fingerprint authentication, where to use it, and some of the interesting stuff. So let me go through the path we came from to authenticate users, because that's the where the security starts, right? So I'll go through the journey from how this authentication came from basic auth to the intelligent adaptive authentication. Right? So earlier days, it was all username and password. So that's how everyone got to log into their systems. So if their passwords or those credentials compromised, there can be breaches, there can be phishing attacks somehow. If these passwords or usernames got compromised, what was the best solution they had in these times? So that was to change your passwords regularly. That was the advice they have given all the time, because the underlying systems are not smart enough to identify fraud, right? So then for this, as a solution for that, after these mobile phones and smartphones got mainstream, then the solution for that was something called two-factor authentication, right? So that is using another factor besides username and password to authenticate a user. So the most popular factors for this is SMS and email. So most of us, So as for now, the most popular method of two-factor authentication is to use an SMS OTP. So that was fine for some time, but recently there were some researches done, and this SS7 protocol, which is used for passing text messages and calls through GSM networks, has found some vulnerabilities which hackers can exploit. So they can actually intercept SMS messages even before they reach their target user. So then in these times, only relying on two-factor authentication will not be working. So that's where multi-factor authentication concept comes in. So let's see what are the factors that we can use for user validation. So there are like three main categories. One is something you know, such as a username and password. And the next thing will be something you have, such as an OTP or a hardware key generator. And the next category is something you are, like your face or your fingerprint. So combination of these three factors, three categories, we can implement multi-factor authentication, right? But then the question arises, if we are going to use all these factors every time a user logs in, then the usability of that application will go down fast. So as an example, if I'm opening my banking application, so I have to insert my username, password, and then every time I try to log in, if I had to get an OTP too, so that's not very convenient for a user, right? So that is where we have to use adaptive authentication. So let me explain something about adaptive authentication. So that concept is that authentication adapts according to the situation. So this authentication works based on a user profile. So this user profile consists of users' geographic location, the devices that he usually logs in, and user's role, and many other related stuff. So when in each time a user logs into the system will use this data and calculate a risk score. So based on that risk score, system determines which steps to throw in to use to authenticate that user. So the more smarter or intelligent the system can assess these situations, assess this risk, the security and the usability of the system goes up. So as an example, there's a user who's been regularly logging in from Sri Lanka to a mobile banking app. So suddenly the same credentials is being used in another country. So then the adaptive authentication will identify that irregularity and it will throw in another step of additional authentication. So with more and more users onboarding to these online banking solutions, online fraud also goes up. So having this adaptive authentication in banking applications, it can really increase security while not compromising usability. So the question lies on how we can make this adaptive authentication intelligent. I think no one has an answer for it.
Yes. Thanks, Simita. Thanks for the introduction to adaptive authentication. So let me just go through the widely used context and scenarios of adaptive authentication. So due to its context-based nature, so adaptive authentication would usually include environment-based, device-based, attribute-based, risk-based, and behavior-based factors when deciding authentication mechanism and steps. And plus, depending on the context, the number of steps and the mechanisms can be different. So then let's discuss four different real world scenarios, which is really important, especially in banking and finance sector. And so let me start with the environment-based adaptive authentication. So in environment-based adaptive authentication, usually users are authenticated based on their environment factors such as geographical locations, GPS data, users travel routings, and so on. So mainly this environment based adaptive authentication can be achieved with uses GPS data and IP address checking. So if you take a simple example, say two users are log into the system in from two different places. So based on their geolocations and their other environmental factors, we can differently challenge the users with different authentication mechanisms or steps. So that's about environment based authentication. And the next scenario I'm going to discuss is device based authentication. So this device based authentication is also really important when it comes to banking and finance sector. So as we know, most of us nowadays use our smart devices to log into this banking application. So depending on properties of the devices which are being to access the application, we can challenge users with different steps or different authentication mechanisms. So the IAM solution we built for DFCC actually had a requirement to restrict users with only 5 devices. So even that requirement or even that feature we can use to improve systems security or add additional adaptive authentication steps. Not only that, we can here we can make use of analytical data as well. So by using WSO2 analytical data, we can collect most of the device data. So by analyzing device data like device usage pattern, frequency of usage, and those data, we can challenge different users with a different authentication mechanism. So that's it. That's basically about device-based authentication. And the next two topics will be risk-based and behavior-based authentication. In mainly risk-based adaptive authentication, we authenticate users based on their risk score. That risk score can be calculated using many different factors like user event data, historical data, real-time transactional data, or the critically even with the criticality of the operation. So using those kinds of different data and factors, we can calculate that risk score, and depending on that risk score, we can challenge different users with different authentication mechanisms or steps. Let me take a small example. So say for example, if there's a business use case for this bank to add additional authentication method, if a particular transaction is over $5,000, so that can be scenarios we can easily achieve with the adaptive authentication. So using this risk-based adaptive authentication mechanism. And the next context I'm going to discuss is a behavior-based authentication, and this is also really important in especially in finance and banking sector, because Uh, Here we are mainly dealing with sensitive data and money basically. So this behavior based adaptive authentication is really important if we can incorporate, incorporate that mechanisms into our systems. So basically in a behavior based adaptive authentication is basically based on behaviors of data, basically uses a behavioral data like users login hours, session durations, success and failure operation count and so on. And those kind of data also we can gather via identity analytics engine. So these are the main four context I'm going to discuss. Then next we'll discuss how we can make our adaptive authentication more intelligent. So make it more intelligent. There could be many ways, but one single mechanism would be to use analytical data we have collected. So for this, I have created a small a demonstration, and for this demonstration, I have come up with a machine learning model which predicts users regular login hours. So depending on the user, that particular hour would be usual or unusual. So depending on that decision, basically users are provided with different levels of authentication. So let me show you a small demo. Yeah, so for this demo purposes, I'm using this sample application to log in. So let me log in with one user first. So I'm going to use user Mike. And when I enter credentials and hit login, that user is directly redirect to the home page. Then let me log in with another user. So this time I'm going to use user John. Yes, as you can see, for user John, the deciding factor retrieved as unusual login hour. So because of that, for this user, additional layer of authentication mechanism is prompted. So in order for this user to log in, he has to enter additional hardware key. So let me show you. Once you add the generated key, yeah, so that user was able to successfully log into the system. So this practical scenario can be easily achieved with using a custom adaptive authentication script. So let me show you this script. So this basically the a custom script I used to add that additional layer of security. First, I have added the two different steps. First step is the basic authentication, and second one is the hardware key authenticator. And in here, if you can see, I'm calling the ML model API to retrieve the decision depending on the username. So depending on the decision, I am prompting the user with the additional step. So that's basically how you can achieve adaptive authentication in a more practical way. So as you can see, as identity analytical data being one of the most important part in this intelligent adaptive authentication. So I think Savani would be the ideal person to explain more about WSO2 IS identity analytics and how we can make use of it to improve our system. Savani?
Yes, one. As you mentioned, we can use identity analytics to make the dynamic decisions about the authentication process, and then we can implement adaptive authentication or intelligent adaptive authentication with that. Also, not only that, actually, identity analytics can be used to secure your systems, as well as it can be used to achieve your business goals. That's the most important thing. It's not only about security, but also it can use your achieve your overall business success. So before moving to those details, let me explain a little bit about what is identity analytics. So in simple terms, identity analytics means you process vast amount of identity and access management data using various technologies. So it can be newest technologies like machine learning or artificial intelligence. So there are mainly two ways of doing this. First one is batch analysis. In that case, you gather data in a certain period of time and then you analyze that data. So with that, you can identify the access patterns, login patterns, and the trends. Those can be used to make your business decisions, as well as to improve your security processes. So also, second option is the real-time analysis. In that case, you have to analyze the identity and access management data in real time. So one example would be, if there's an attack, that need to identify at that point and need to take the relevant measurements. So that's one example of real-time analysis. So another example would be, if I get the same scenario like Timothy and one explained. So in the adaptive authentication, if one user is login to normally he or she is logging to his the online application using Sri Lanka, but if they travel abroad, they have to log into then they have to log into their online banking application. In that case, we can identify this person is logging from another geographical location, and then it is possible to incorporate another factor into their authentication process. So that's also one example where we need real-time analysis. So if we talk about this batch analysis and real-time analysis, there are some facts or indicators that we can derive from identity and access management data. So if I talk about a little bit about these things, one would be, you can easily identify customer growth over time, and also customer growth by geographical location, age, profession. So this kind of information is very important when it comes to the business. So when you are planning your business in future, so you can get this information, and you can plan according to those information. Also, with the identity analytics, you can identify the frequently used business functions. So when it comes to the banking application, there are a lot of business functionalities. Using the identity analytics, you can identify frequently used and also most favorite business functions. And also using the identity analytics, you can identify favorite modes of business, like normally for if we take a banking application, you have web application as well as a mobile application. Using the identity analytics, you can figure out what is the favorite mode of business of the users. And also using the identity analytics, you can identify the access patterns, login patterns, and the success rates of logins, failure rates of logins, and the details about the sessions. All these things are very important to make business decisions, as well as the improve your security of your applications. When we talk about the advantages of identity analytics, major advantage of identity analytics is this can be used to make important decisions about your business. So that's the main thing. So it's not all about security, it's also about the business. Using the identity analytics, you can get an idea about the user behaviors and also the key factors that relevant to these users, like reputation, trust, the risk. So those kind of information you can analyze and get from identity analytics. So those things are very important when we are taking the business decisions. If I take one simple example, so we say bank need to run a marketing campaign for a particular functionality, we say for a loan scheme. So in that case, from the identity analytics, you can easily figure out what is the interested audience. Then you can focus that audience and you can do the market campaign, and then you can achieve your purpose actually in that case. So that's one simple example how you can use the identity analytics in your business. So apart from that, security, we talk when it comes to the banking application, we talk about security all the time. So in these days, we hear about a lot of cyber attacks, like phishing attacks, malware attacks, ransomware attacks. So those things are very common words these days, because we hear these things all the time, because those are very common in because of this online nature of everything. So identity analytics can be used to identify those things as well as the prevent those things, and improve the your security process to restrict those things. So as an example, so using the identity analytics, you can easily find out the login patterns or login rates over time. So in that you can easily identify brute force kind of attacks, and also that can be used to implement anti-password brute force attacks. And also you can use identity analytics to prevent anti-phishing attacks. So those are some of the interesting things that you can do using the identity analytics. Not only that, so when it comes to organization, we talk about the application as well as the organization level. So this identity analytics can be used to improve the overall security of the application as well as your within the organizational processes. So that's one of the most important things. So also this identity analytics can be used to implement fraud detection, fraud prevention, and implement your threat model of your organization. There are these are some of the advantages of identity analytics. So apart from security and the business usability, also this can use to improve the user experience, because by looking at the analytics data, you can figure out what are the areas users are most interested, and how much time they spend on these things, and what are the processes or the functionalities users get most time to complete. So in that way, you can identify the usability, and you can then analyze that, and you can improve the user experience. That's also very important when we come to this mobile application and web application. So these are some of the advantages of using identity analytics. So if I talk about the WSO2 identity and identity analytics, so WSO2 identity analytics provide lots of dashboards. So I'll show you few sample dashboards to you, and then I'll explain how you can use those things in your business, as well as you can use many other options in there. Let me share my screen. So I assume you can see my screen. So in here you can see some of the default dashboard that provide in the by WSO2 identity analytics. So in this case, you can see in the first one, it provide user login attempts over time. So this is very important to prevent attacks, and also the identify the login patterns. So this is a very important detail when it comes to these security and business aspect. And also in this dashboard, it shows a summary of login attempts, what is the success rate and the failure rate. So this kind of information. In this third dashboard, it shows the login attempts over geographical region. So we talked about what is the importance of that earlier. So you can easily figure out that kind of data using this identity analytics. And not only the success, also the failure rates you can easily identify. And also you can categorize login attempts over service provider as identity providers, or users, or user roles, or user stores. So that kind of categorization also can be done using identity analytics. And also you can get detailed descriptions about logins. Same as this login details, you can get the details about the sessions. So not only that, these are the very simple dashboards, but according to your requirement, it is possible to implement many other dashboards to cater your business requirement, and according to your requirement. So here we talk about the identity analytics specifically for the business perspective. So in that case, we are talking about the organizational perspective. But it's very important to think about the customer aspect as well, because customer identity is one major thing that we have to consider when we talk about the customer identity and access management. So in that case, consent management, self-sharing identity, those kind of things are come into play. So Tara has some interesting details to share with us about these things.
Thank you, Savani. My colleagues explained that how this data protection is very important these days. So when it comes to the data protections, you know that with the protection, we have to have a legal side of this. So in that, GDPR comes to the picture. GDPR is General Data Protection Regulation. So in this GDPR, it helps to improve the protections of data. For example, the websites and the user, both sides have to safeguard this data to make sure, give the clarification that this data is safe. So that's the regulation GDPR is providing. So we have this GDPR, and how these websites achieve this GDPR. That's where consent management process coming. Consent management is the process that helps to meet this GDPR regulation for websites. How we do is obtaining users' consent. So you know that when you visit a website, there are ways to collect your personal data using cookies, for example. So for that, the website should ask the consent of the user. So that is the process of consent management. Okay, so when we talk about this consent management, I will start with one simple example. I think with a simple example that everyone is familiar with. You might have heard or used the Facebook application. In that, when you are trying to use this application first time, it asking the consent for using your profile picture and your first name, last name, any other relevant details. When you give the consent, the application, it uses this personal data. And I heard some people telling that they are kind of storing these photos that you are uploading in this Face app in the cloud storage. But actually, if you read that privacy policy, which is very large actually, so you might not read it. So if you read it, it has actually mentioned. So you can't actually go and tell FaceApp that why you uploading my photos into the cloud storage, because you have given the consent. So this is general data. It's public profile picture, your first name, last name. But when it comes to the banking section, the data, the relevant data for the banking is very sensitive. That is very utmost important thing to get this protection for the banking section. That is why we need this kind of mechanism. So banking applications, wallet application, those things already have this API management level security. But we have to go another step and get these mechanisms like consent management, because it's viral. Otherwise, we can't actually ensure these protections of data. So next question is, someone can ask why we need this GDPR regulation protection, why we can't keep a website without using this consent management. Because if one person think that kind of website using their personal data, they can sue that website. In Sri Lanka, we have data protection authority system, and in that the normal penalty, the maximum one, going for 10 million Sri Lankan rupees in Sri Lanka, but that differs from different countries. One another example for UK, it's 20 million euros. So you can understand. And next time, make sure to read the privacy policy. Okay. So I told that what's the importance of these GDPR regulations and the consent management, but why we need this platform to handle these things? Because there's a complex thing behind in this GDPR regulation management with the consent management. For the user, it's just one click. You read the privacy policy and you click that I agree, but in the behind, it should go according to the GDPR regulation. That's why we need this platform for managing this kind of thing. So there are several platforms. I'm just explaining one thing, which is WSO2 identity server consent management platform. This admin service and RESTful service. And with that, it automates this consent management process. So it makes easier to get GDPR compliant. I told there's a process, but you might think why it's simple. No, it's not. I will tell why it's not simple. Because if you get a consent, it has several categories. I will explain only few things. So in a consent, for example, it has a purpose and purpose categories. So for example, for the banking section, when you have privacy policy, if you had read, it might ask your email address. So the purpose for this is communication. For the communication purpose, this is the category. And then the description is retrieving email address to send some email notification for the communication purpose. So that one part. And under these purposes, here comes the PII categories. PII category means personal identifiable information. In that also there are different hierarchy and different categories. So I will explain few things. So your name and first name, last name, and your occupation title, those kind of things come to the individual category. And then your location, your geographical location, and your organization location, your country, those things come to this location category. And the next thing is emails, national identity cards, license, this kind of structured ID category. So when you go to a website and in the policy, when you select a purpose, under that purpose, when you are giving the consent, there are categories. I'll get the previous example where in the banking section, they ask for the communication purposes. And what is that? Main thing is individual category. And the second thing is structured ID PII category. So you can select both. And I will go to the next one and I will explain why we need these two categories. Assume this is the face app, the previous example. In that, you go and read the privacy policy. There are categories that you have to select because in the some privacy policies, if you expand, you can select what are the consent I am giving, what are the consent I am not giving. So in that, you can give individual category related consent. But then it's come to the advertisement going through geographical location and you can't reject that. So it's a user's selection to reject that or give that consent and use this application. And so likewise, there are several things. And another one is like the time period that if you give a consent to an application, they can't continuously use that. You can give a time period for the next 3 months. I am giving this consent. After that, you can't use my personal data. So likewise, there are several things. That's why we need this kind of platform. So what I will do is I will just go through the WSO2 documentation and tell you how you can use it, and you can simply understand everything what I said if you see that Swagger definitions and everything in the WSO2 IS consent management APIs. So I will share my screen and I will show you that. Okay, if you go to the consent management documentation in IS, there's a descriptive explanation, and I will go to this consent management API Swagger. In that one, you can see everything I explained, the adding consent, adding PI categories, and adding purposes and purpose categories. So we'll just tell you some example here. So marketing purposes, legal purposes, and these are the PI categories. So email and username, individual category, structured ID category. Likewise, this is like very easy process to use. So anyone can use the WSO2 IS consent management APIs and automate this easily and get the GDPR regulation compliant. So this is for today, and I will give the control back to Savani so she can continue with the conclusion. Thank you, Savani.
Thank you, Tara. So today we discuss about three main aspects of identity and access management, mainly about the adaptive authentication, identity analytics, as well as the consent management. So those three are very important topics when it comes to the identity and access management. And we talk about how those can be used in the banking and finance industry to overcome these challenges that we are facing in this COVID-19 pandemic season. So also Pradeepan has explained DFCC bank perspective, what are the measures they have taken to incorporate identity and access management, and then what they have achieved with this. So with the we are happy to answer any of your queries regarding the topics that we have discussed today, and also general about the identity access management topic as well. So if you have any questions related to these things, please send your queries to this email address, apacinfo@chakra.com. So I would like to thank you all for joining with us today. I hope it will be useful to you all. Thank you very much, you all.